You had warpers, beamers, slashermen, you had drawer-ins, you had giver-ins, you had weft winders.
Well, it was hard work. You worked steadily all day. You didn't sit gossiping or anything. You worked really hard all day.
At the seasonal peak, we would have been producing 200,000 metres of fabric per week.
The Moygashel name was extremely well known in the textile world and amongst the public.
The home of Moygashel linen is a rural setting in County Tyrone. Nearby, the old manor house of Dungannon Park stands on high ground, close beside a lovely man-made lake.
Coming out of Dungannon, when you come down the hill, the first thing you seen was the factory. The village on up, there was not only cottages on the right-hand side. There was 8 cottages up the main road, and then there was 6 two-storey cottages at the top of the hill. That was all the houses on the main streets in Moygashel at that time.
People came into the village to work in the factory complex, and the factory complex became the hub of village life. Everything sort of centred around it, or the people who took part in all the pastimes worked in some capacity in the mill.
I first joined the company in 1943. I came out from Dungannon by a utility bus, and I was quite surprised to see the hundreds of people pouring in with me.
At the peak, at night, at 6 o'clock at night, they were handing up to 30 or 36 buses all lined up there waiting to take them on home to different places, to Caledon, Portadown, Armagh, on
A lot of them travelled from maybe Cookstown and Coal Island and places, adjoining Dungannon. There would have been quite a lot of young people came in buses. As a matter of fact, I think the first night that I ever came through Moygashel after I got married and came here to live, I saw so many buses and I was so young that I was scared stiff. I thought I never would see the village, for there were so many buses of young people and workers at that stage,
The apprentices all had to wear white boiler suits. We had 2 of those. They were laundered twice a week. And you also had to wear a white shirt and white collar. That was very important. It was very important that we created a good image for the company. And we had to travel to Belfast when we were doing our studies, first class. And that was to create a good image there. When we went to Belfast, we had to dine in what was known then as the restaurant in Belfast, which was Robinson Cleaver's. I think it was the 4th floor or the 5th floor, I'm not quite sure which. But that's where all the leading lights of society had their lunches. And it cost us the princely sum of 7 and 6pence for our lunch at that time. But we were only getting 33 and a penny a week as a wage. But the company paid for that. That was all to create the image again.
The wages weren't all that good now. They were poor enough. I would say when I started in it, I would have been earning maybe £4 or £5 a week. But having said that, it was hard to get a rise. You had to beg very hard to get a rise. It wasn't such a thing as getting a yearly rise or anything like that. Or we had no union. There was no union. You would have been really scorned if you had even mentioned a union.
I started as an apprentice factory manager on the princely sum of 34 shillings and 8 old pence per week in old money.
My first living memory is bringing my father's tea down if he had to work overtime. And in those days, it wasn't the case you weren't asked were you working overtime, you were told you were working overtime. And either myself or a brother, there was a girl who would have been working, a winder in Moygashel, would have called at our door and told my mother that Willie's working.
Working day then in the weaving section was from 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening, 5 days a week, and 8 in the morning to 12:30 on Saturday. It was a 5.5 day week. And then 1945 or thereabouts, the 5 day week came in to great glee. No more Saturday morning work.
Well, the factory horn would have blew. But you would have had bosses standing in the yard, and if you had to come at 2 minutes past 8, you were lucky if you got in.
You were very strict on time. You had to be in dead before 8 o'clock. You were expected to be in there and standing at your post ready to start off at 8 o'clock. And at fair dawn, then you had an hour break at 12:30 to 1:30. And then you stopped in around 6 o'clock at night.
Over the years, we had many brand names. I remember one which was called Esquire Lake, which was rather ironic. In Esquire Lake was a large lake that supplied the water to the factory, and the range was for outsized people. So Esquire Lake became known as the big people.
The factory used a lot of water and it came from Esquire Lock, which is fed by springs. And it come on the river right across round, I would say about 3 miles to another lock called the Black Lock. And it come out, went into it and come out of it again in another river and went straight through Dixon's factory and stayed on out to Moygashel.
The tremendous noise made by the looms is the rapid fire of shuttles as they shoot from side to side across the separated threads.
The joiner's shop was next door to the weaving shop, and once you left the joiner's shop and went into the weaving shop, there was nothing, only a clatter of looms going, and it was all worked with ladies, and the noise was just unbelievable.
The level of the noise when you first start when you go home at night, the noise rings in your ears. Continuous noise in your ears. But then you get used to that.
The method of communication in the actual weaving shop was largely lip reading, and weavers became fairly expert at sort of a combination of lip reading and facial expression. And sometimes you were left in no doubt as to what it meant.
The ladies, of course, were more better at lip reading than men. They were always plenty to talk about. They would talk from one set of looms to the other. Men weren't so talkative.
My first knowledge of Moygashel was as a young boy, being brought from Dungannon on the bar of my father's bicycle to see the factory on fire, and the fire being fought by the Armagh Fire Brigade.
as you would be aware, flax would be a thing that would, once it would start to burn, you'd have bother putting it out.
Of course, the company, having learned of the dangers of fire, were very keen that each department would have its own firefighting department.
They put a fire line right round with hydrants at different places, and that covered the whole factory, and it covered the Scotch mill and all. Now, it was my job for to start that, part of my job, for to keep those fire engines, and I would have started the fire engines every morning to make sure that if they were required, they were serviceable.
We formed a little team in each department, right through from the garment, the finishing, the weaving, the bleaching, all had their own departments of 4 or 5 members, and we had little pumps which would pump the water up. So this developed into competitions, annual competitions, to prove our efficiency.
At the outbreak of war, I remember they switched over in the weaving end, where they used to weave just linen. They switched over to making hose pipes and parachute tapes.
We were considered most essential to the war effort. Airplane linens, parachute harness, hose pipes, wove hose pipes in those days, and several items that were essential to the war effort.
The weaving shed had a subdivision which wove parachute tape and hose pipes for the government on war contracts, and that worked on a fairly continuous shift. They were woven on looms which were modified for the purpose.
Well, weaving actually is thread actually come up from the back of the loom up into the front, and there's a shuttle that moves across between 2 strands of thread, and this shuttle goes between them, and as it goes to one end, it reverses, thread reverses, one goes up and all goes down, and the shuttle comes back again, and this is what makes the cloth.
Well, we took the grey fabric from the loom, and our job was to turn that into a saleable commodity. Firstly by bleaching. Earlier days, the bleaching was all done in the field surrounding the mill. Then we developed bleaching processes, some of which were developed in-house. After the bleaching, we went on to dyeing. Dyeing was carried out using vat dye stuffs. They were very expensive, but they were the fastest known dyes available.
And we used to develop the shade ranges from a Dulux colour card. That's where we picked them from. A designer came in from England, a lady designer, and she wanted a specific colour in a fabric. She decided which fabric she wanted. That was all right, but she wanted a specific colour, and it was a blue she wanted. So after a long deliberation with her, she eventually turned round and said, "I think it's duck egg blue, or thereabouts." And whereupon Mr. Lee, who was the director in charge, he detailed 2 people to go out and find duck eggs somewhere in the country and bring them back, which was duly done, and that was how the colour was developed.
I was trained as a pattern cutter. I was introduced to the designer who produced their sketch of their idea for a garment for the coming season. I would then pin onto the work stand what we called a mull. The garment was then cut out and made up by the sample machinists. They would produce a garment which, with my cooperation, interpreted as near as possible the designer's wishes. Each garment was inspected individually for general aspect, for any flaws that might be in the manufacturing or in the fabric itself.
No one had quality control then in textiles, only Moygashel. And that's what we were doing, setting up these laboratories, testing the fabrics from all aspects. When I came into the company, I was asked by the directors to look after the VIPs that would come around the works. Very important buyers came over from Marks and Spencer's at that time, and of course we'd taken a lot of time to set up a lot of testing in the laboratories, and of course I had this all set off to a fine art, and we had a drying oven in one of the laboratories. Of course, they were very interested in the whole process and were asking me a lot of questions. And as I said, and this is the oven which we use for drying the samples. And you'll see the samples now being dried. And I opened the door. And when I opened the door, what was sitting in the oven was a pork pie. Models came over to model all the garments in the garment division. They came over on a chartered flight, usually, and the models, they worked from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night, and that was hard work.
I was very fortunate in that when I started selling Moygashel, the name Moygashel was widely known in various countries in the world. We were very active in France and Italy and in Scandinavia and in Greece, the Asian markets, Australia, New Zealand, the African continent, South Africa, the States, Canada, and the Caribbean.
To New York, it was basically 100% linen and polyester linen blends. They were the big thing in New York.
Hot weather countries are looking for coolish fabrics, fabrics that breathe. And of course, the Americans being great travelers and the biggest consumers or users of Moygashel fabrics, either in the piece or in garment fashion, our name had become known all over. The brand name was very, very important. Of course, in England, they call it Moygashel. In America, it's Moygashel. And, well, some of them are difficult getting around it, but they all knew what it was.